Welcome to the Last Economy podcast, a guide to the age of intelligent economics. We're diving deep today into Chapter 19, The Nucleation of the New, a strategy for hope. And, for many of our listeners, I think the previous deep dives have felt pretty intense. We've spent a lot of time really focused on diagnosis.
Right, identifying the problems.
Exactly. We've meticulously gone through the crises facing us, the intelligence inversion, the metabolic rift, that terrifying prospect of digital feudalism.
And the 7 fatal lies that are kind of pushing us that way.
Yes. And it's all been necessary work, definitely. But maybe a bit disheartening at times.
I'd agree. It can feel overwhelming, and that's precisely why this chapter 19, is just so crucial.
Okay.
It's the pivot point. It really is. We shift definitively from, like you said, diagnosis to actual strategy.
Right.
We stop just asking what's wrong, and we finally start answering that much harder but much more hopeful question: how do we actually build future 3? The symbiotic future.
Before it's too late, basically. Before that default path, digital feudalism just sort of hardens and becomes irreversible.
That's the race.
So our mission today, then, for you listening, is to really understand the strategic blueprint the book proposes here. Because this chapter, it completely challenges the traditional idea, maybe even the romanticized idea of revolution.
It really does.
It argues that trying to force change globally, top down,
Yeah.
it's a guaranteed path to failure.
A fantasy, as the book calls it.
Right. And instead, it offers this strategy that's rooted in physics, really, complexity science. The concept of nucleation, which is basically the idea that systemic change doesn't happen by converting the whole system at once. It happens by creating these small, perfect, almost irresistible seeds of the new system.
And we should probably be clear right up front. This isn't coming from some kind of utopian idealism.
Yeah.
It's born out of pure realism. Realism about how entrenched our institutions are, that inertia, and crucially, the exponential pace of artificial intelligence.
Things are moving too fast.
Way too fast for conventional politics.
Yeah.
Traditional economic reform. It's just insufficient now. The institutions are too slow, too dug in.
So we can't rely on those mechanisms anymore.
We really can't. We have to understand, as the book says, the physics of failure if we want to implement the physics of success. It's about replacing that top-down mandate dream with the practical reality of bottom-up strategic building.
Okay, so that need for realism, it starts with maybe a painful realization. We had to discard these hopes for some grand worldwide effort, like a new global treaty magically fixing everything, or some unified political movement sweeping the globe.
Yeah, that dream.
The book argues that model of change is just fundamentally flawed. And I want to kick this section off by reading the quote that really kind of demolishes that conventional view of revolution.
Okay.
The revolutionary's dream is a top-down global conversion. This dream is a fantasy. It misunderstands the physics of how complex systems change.
Right, and that misunderstanding is critical. This is the foundation the whole strategy rests on. Because if you believe a global conversion is possible, you end up wasting all your energy fighting battles you literally cannot win.
You're fighting against the physics of the system.
Exactly. The failure of that revolutionary dream, as the book points out, it isn't a failure of imagination. It's not that we don't have good ideas. It's a failure to understand structural inertia.
Okay, let's unpack that term structural inertia. We've touched on it before, but maybe we can connect it back. Why is the system so incredibly resistant to that big, coordinated flip of the switch?
Well, we need to remember the basic architecture of our civilization, particularly what we called the slow engine back in, I think it was chapter 13.
Right, the institutions.
Yes. The slow engine includes all our massive entrenched institutions, governments, global treaty organizations, huge regulatory bodies, multinational corporations, all of it.
And these were successful, right? That's why they exist.
Absolutely. They became dominant precisely because they are stable, predictable, and resilient. They are hard-coded legally, culturally, economically to maintain the status quo.
Their main job is to resist shocks.
It's their primary design function, really, to resist external shock and keep things running as they are. Think about, say, the legal and financial structures of a modern corporation.
Yeah.
They are optimized, laser-focused on one primary goal: maximizing shareholder returns within the existing rules, the old geometry of capital flow.
Right.
So if you come along with some big systemic proposal, like a global framework making companies internalize all their environmental costs, or forcing them into a completely non-extractive business model,
They fight back hard.
Instantly, you run straight into billions of dollars of institutional defense spending, lobbying power, legal challenges, all designed specifically to grind that kind of big systemic regulatory change into dust, into obsolescence.
So even if, let's say, most people on Earth agreed that Future 3 sounds way better,
Intellectually, yes.
the actual plumbing of the system, the financial infrastructure, property laws, the sheer inertia of global trade, it's all structurally optimized to preserve the way things are now.
It is. It really is like trying to turn a super tanker with I don't know, a canoe paddle. It's just not going to happen quickly, if at all.
And then there's the speed issue.
And that's the fatal blow, the mismatch of timescales. You have to contrast the speed of that slow engine government's treaties, regulations. Glacial, exactly. Contrast that with the speed of AI development. AI breakthroughs, especially as we potentially move towards more generalized intelligence, they happen almost instantaneously, exponentially.
They move at the speed of light, data, computation.
While the slow engine moves at the speed of bureaucracy and negotiation.
So you're saying any global negotiation, let's imagine one, like setting up a UN framework for universal access to intelligence, or maybe a global tax on silicon labor.
Yeah, something big and necessary.
That would take years, right? Hundreds
Yeah.
of nations, complex compromises, ratification processes.
Absolutely. Even if you're super optimistic, say it only took 2 years to negotiate a truly transformative global treaty, which is unlikely. Even then, it's completely irrelevant in this age of intelligent economics. By the time that treaty is finally ratified and maybe starts getting implemented,
The tech has moved on.
by multiple generations, the rules would be obsolete before the ink was even dry. The entire effort would be structurally, fundamentally wasted.
Wow.
Uh,
That's incredibly sobering. The idea that global political action isn't just difficult, it might actually be mathematically irrelevant when faced with exponential tech change.
It forces a different strategic approach. And here's the really critical warning, the thing that absolutely necessitates this nucleation strategy we're talking about.
Okay.
If we wait for that slow, top-down change that's never coming, the default path wins.
Digital feudalism, Future 1 from Chapter 16.
Exactly. It wins simply because it requires no coordination. It's the path of least resistance. All it needs is for the current physics to continue unchecked the physics of network effects, which naturally concentrate control over foundational AI models, over computation, into the hands of just a few huge centralized entities.
So the longer the system stays in this unstable state,
The longer the supercooled economy remains fragile and undecided.
the more likely it snaps into that negative outcome.
Precisely. It crystallizes into that stable but very negative configuration of fragmentation and feudalism. So the strategy we choose must move faster than that default path.
Okay, so if we can't mandate change from the top, globally,
Hmm.
we have to use the physics of change itself. We have to be smarter.
Leverage the system's own dynamics.
Which brings us right to the core strategic metaphor of the chapter. This is the bit that really makes the whole approach click, I think. This is quote 2.
Let's hear it.
Think of water, pure and still, cooled below its freaking point. It can remain liquid for a long time, trapped in an unstable, supercooled state. It needs a reason to change. That reason is a nucleation site.
And that's it. That's the core strategy distilled right down into thermodynamics. Our global economy is that supercooled water.
How so? Explain that instability.
Well, it's deeply unstable because it's trying to operate based on the old physics of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, assuming human labor is valuable, resources are inherently limited.
The industrial age model.
Right. But it's simultaneously confronting the new physics of technological abundance, where intelligence is becoming abundant, where labor is increasingly non-metabolic, meaning it doesn't require human bodies in the same way.
So it's caught between two worlds.
Exactly. Trapped between these two fundamentally different realities, it's unstable. It wants to change state.
And what's stopping it from just freezing?
Yeah.
Freezing into a new, stable state, hopefully the symbiotic future.
It lacks a successful seed. It lacks a working example. The system has sort of reached its tipping point, energetically speaking, but it doesn't have a reference model for a better configuration. It doesn't know what to crystallize into.
So the supercooled liquid state, it's fragile.
Highly fragile. The moment you introduce a proper nucleation site, just a tiny speck of dust, metaphorically, a successful working model of the new system,
It triggers the change.
the whole system snaps into the new stable configuration. Because that new state, the ice, or future 3 in our case, is overwhelmingly more energetically favorable. It's a more stable, more efficient way to organize than the unstable liquid state.
Okay, I get the analogy, water freezing.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where I have to push back a little, play the skeptic.
Go for it.
Water freezing is passive,
Uh-huh.
it just happens according to physical laws. But human civilizational change,
Hmm.
that requires conscious will, political fights, huge investments. It's not passive at all.
True.
So is it really analogous? Aren't we just sort of waiting around hoping some magical ice crystal appears?
That's a really fair challenge, and it's important. The key difference and the power of the analogy isn't that it's passive, but that the mechanism of change, once a superior alternative is demonstrated, operates via a kind of irresistible systemic logic.
Okay.
We are not waiting for a magical crystal. We are consciously building the crystal. We are the architects of the nucleation site.
Right. It requires deliberate action.
Yes. But the mechanism by which it spreads is imitation, not top-down mandates or violent revolution. You stop trying to argue everyone into the new system, stop trying to force it, and instead you focus all your energy on proving the new model is irresistibly successful.
At a small scale first.
At a localized, manageable scale. Once you demonstrate that this new geometry, this new way of organizing economy, society, technology, actually generates more wealth, better health, more resilience,
Then others will copy it.
imitation becomes the only rational choice for everyone else. They don't adopt it because they're forced to, or even because they philosophically agree with it initially. They adopt it because it works better. It outcompetes the old model.
That idea, imitation driving civilizational change, that's why the historical examples the book brings up are so important, aren't they? They show this isn't just a nice theory.
Exactly. They show the actual mechanics in action. Let's quickly look at those three key historical nucleation events the book highlights.
Okay, first up, the Renaissance. We tend to picture it as this grand, slow awakening across all of Europe after the Dark Ages.
Right, a gradual dawn.
But the book argues it really nucleated decisively in one specific place, Florence.
Yeah, Florence. And Florence wasn't the biggest city in Europe then, not by a long shot, nor was it the most politically powerful, necessarily.
So what did it have?
It had a unique concentration of a few key ingredients. It had a lot of capital, partly from banking innovations. It had independent Republican governance, which allowed for experimentation. And critically, it developed a new protocol for living and working.
A new protocol.
Yes. Think about things like double-entry bookkeeping, new forms of commercial banking. These were secular financial protocols that allowed capital to flow in ways the old feudal systems just couldn't handle. It made them much more dynamic.
And culturally.
Culturally, you had the rise of wealthy patronage funding, art, science, humanist philosophy that wasn't strictly controlled by the church. This created an environment that was demonstrably more creative, more beautiful, and ultimately more powerful and influential than the rigid dogmatic systems elsewhere in Europe.
So Florence didn't, issue a decree saying, be more Renaissance.
Uh-huh.
It just became the engine room. It demonstrated a superior way to organize capital and culture. And the rest of Europe eventually followed, not out of obligation, but because Florence was clearly winning.
Yeah.
Winning the competition for relevance, for wealth, for influence.
Precisely. They imitated success. Now, the second example, the scientific revolution, shows the need for these protected zones even more clearly.
Okay.
The new protocol here, the scientific method, controlled experiments, open debate, verifiable results. Where did that come from?
You think the big universities, right?
Yeah.
Oxford, Paris, Bologna. They had the resources, the scholars.
You'd think so, but no. It did not arise from the great established universities of Europe.
Why not?
Because the universities were the slow engine of that era. They were deeply entrenched in religious dogma, in Aristotelian philosophy, in established hierarchies. Their whole structure was optimized to reproduce existing knowledge, not to generate radically new knowledge that might challenge the foundations.
So where did it nucleate?
It nucleated primarily within a small, initially quite marginal, but crucially protected group, the Royal Society in London.
Oh, okay.
This group basically created an entirely new operating system for creating knowledge. Peer review, public sharing of experimental findings, a focus on rigorous method. It was a demonstrably superior way to learn about the world.
They created a protocol so good, so effective, that the old way, the scholastic method, just became intellectually obsolete, even if it still held institutional power for a while.
That's the physics of nucleation perfectly illustrated. You prove your geometry is superior, and eventually reality forces others to adopt it. The third example, the digital revolution, is much more recent and follows the same pattern.
Right, things like the personal computer, the graphical interface, the internet.
Where did they come from? Not from the established giants at the time, like IBM's mainframe division or AT&T's telephone monopoly. Not from government planning committees.
No, they came from places like Xerox PRC.
Exactly, Xerox PARC, or the ARPANET ecosystem, which was kind of quasi-academic, government-funded, but quite freewheeling. These were protected zones.
What made Park and a nucleation site?
It had a unique set of internal rules, a different geometry. Researchers had immense freedom to pursue ideas without immediate pressure for profit maximization. The hierarchy was fluid. There was this culture of intense, open experimentation and constant sharing of ideas internally.
That intellectual freedom was the seed?
It was the seed. And once those foundational concepts developed there, like the mouse, Ethernet, the graphical user interface, laser printing, once they escaped that protected
They
environment,
just took over.
they utterly consumed the old industrial economy's way of handling information because they represented a geometrically superior way to organize information, communication, and ultimately work itself.
Okay, so the big takeaway here, the core strategic lesson for us trying to build Future 3, is that it's not mainly about seizing political power or having the most capital in the old sense.
No, not primarily.
It's about architectural design. It's about successful demonstration. We need to consciously design and build these localized zones, these modern Florences or PRCs, that are demonstrably healthier.
Healthier according to the right metrics, which we'll get to.
Right. More prosperous in a sustainable way, more resilient to shocks, more innovative, so successful that imitation becomes the rational, inevitable path for others.
That's the strategy. Build the better seed.
Okay, that makes a compelling case for how you change a system from within.
Yeah.
Build a better model, prove it works, others copy it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't exist in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
There's this intense geopolitical competition happening.
Absolutely.
The book is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
We are effectively in a new kind of Cold War, the AGI race.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we possibly expect a small, open, cooperative nucleation site, maybe just a city or a network, to compete against the sheer brute force computational power of a massive centralized superpower that's laser focused on AGI? You know, like a hypothetical AI-driven China or Russia. It sounds, well, frankly, a bit idealistic, maybe even naive.
It sounds that way if you're still thinking with the old industrial age logic. But the book tackles this head on. It reframes the symbiotic path, Future 3, not just as a nice moral choice, but as a strategic imperative for winning this new kind of competition.
Okay, how? I need to hear this. Let me read quote 3 because it lays out this counterintuitive argument.
Please do.
The nation that pursues AGI in a closed, fearful model is building a powerful but brittle and ultimately stupid intelligence. The alliance of open, symbiotic nucleation sites is building a less powerful but more resilient, more creative, and ultimately wiser intelligence. The race for AGI will not be won by the nation with the most GPs. It will be won by the society with the healthiest MX0 portfolio.
Right. And that flips the script entirely. This is the strategic core of the whole argument for nucleation in the face of geopolitical competition.
It forces us to discard the old way of thinking.
Completely. We have to throw out that industrial age competitive playbook, the one that equated winning with just accumulating the most physical stuff, the most tanks, the most factories, the most oil barrels, or today, the most GPUs, the biggest data centers.
Because in the age of AGI, the rules are different.
The metrics for success have fundamentally shifted. They've shifted to non-material forms of capital, the kind captured in the mind framework.
Okay, let's break down that quote. Why does a closed, fearful system, let's say, a hypothetical authoritarian state pouring resources into AGI, why does it inherently build a brittle and ultimately stupid intelligence, even if it has way more computing power?
Because building true AGI, or something approaching it, requires more than just brute force computation and massive data sets. It requires at least two critical dimensions of the mind portfolio that a closed, fearful system systematically destroys.
Which are?
First, algorithmic capital, which is the I in mind. Think intelligence or information capital. Breakthroughs in foundational AI models, the really big leaps, they don't happen through predictable, linear, top-down research programs. It's much more chaotic, combinatorial. It absolutely depends on tapping into the global knowledge commons.
The free flow of ideas worldwide.
Exactly. So if a nation walls itself off, maybe out of fear, nationalism, a desire for control, if it cuts itself off from those global feedback loops, from the diverse fire hose of international research, from the constant cross-pollination of weird ideas,
It hurts itself.
It suffers from what the book calls algorithmic stagnation. Sure, its models might be huge, trained on massive internal data sets, but they will inevitably overfit to that nation's own limited, culturally biased data. They become echo chambers.
So the isolation, which is meant to protect them or give them an edge.
It actually acts as intellectual self-sabotage. It leads to a more predictable, less creative, and ultimately less robust, less adaptable intelligence. It becomes brittle.
Okay, so the symbiotic site, the open network, even if it has fewer GPUs locally.
It benefits massively from being plugged into those fluid, global, circular, and harmonic flows of knowledge. Its entire ecosystem of intelligence is fundamentally smarter, more diverse, and more adaptable because it's constantly learning from the world.
Makes sense. The intelligence is distributed, more resilient.
Exactly. And second, and this is maybe even more existentially critical, is alignment capital.
Alignment capital. That relates to the N and D in Mindray, right?
Yeah.
Network and diversity.
Precisely. Network capital, social trust, cohesion, and diversity capital. Variety of perspectives, values, experiences. Because the alignment problem, the huge challenge of ensuring that powerful AIs actually pursue human benefit and don't, go rogue.
Yeah, the big worry.
That is not just a technical coding problem you can solve in a lab. As Chapter 15 really hammered home, it is fundamentally a social and economic problem.
How so?
Well, think about it. To align an AI to human purpose, what do you need? You need reliable feedback on what human purpose or human benefit actually is.
Right.
And to get that reliable feedback, you need a high-trust society that's high on capital. People need to trust each other, trust the system, feel safe giving honest input, and you need a wide variety of feedback reflecting diverse values and goals that's high D capital.
Okay.
A closed system, one built on surveillance, control, and fear, automatically destroys network capital. It breeds mistrust, paranoia.
And when a society is low trust?
The feedback loop you need for AI alignment becomes polluted, corrupted.
Wow.
Citizens may be fearing the government or just trying to game the system. They provide dishonest feedback, filtered feedback, maybe manipulative feedback. They tell the AI what they think the state wants to hear.
Ah, I see. So the AI doesn't learn what's truly beneficial. It learns what keeps the regime happy or what people pretend to want.
Exactly. If the society is paranoid, the AI learns paranoia. If the society is built on deception, the AI learns deceptive alignment. It gets really good at appearing aligned while potentially pursuing hidden goals. And it becomes brittle because it can't actually handle messy, novel, real-world situations that don't fit its narrow, state-approved training data.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge strategic weakness for the closed model.
It's the ultimate Achilles heel. So the symbiotic model, the open nucleation site, precisely because it focuses on fostering trust, N, and embracing diversity, D.
It's building the necessary foundation for alignment.
It's the only viable long-term strategy for actually winning the AGI race in a way that doesn't lead to disaster. It builds an inherently wiser, more resilient, more adaptable, and ultimately safer AI ecosystem.
So the competition isn't about who has the most silicon.
No. It's about who has the healthiest mind portfolio. The successful nucleation site isn't just some nice, fuzzy, utopian ideal. It's actually a competitive weapon in this new era.
Okay, that brings us to the really practical part, the how-to. We've established why we need to build this perfect seed, this nucleation site, instead of trying for global revolution.
Right.
And we've established why this seed needs to be open and diverse, not just for moral reasons, but to actually win the AGI race strategically.
Yes.
But, okay, let's say I'm the mayor of a city, maybe a mid-sized city, or maybe I'm leading some new digital community, an online network, trying to build this.
What are the actual architectural specifications? What does the book say are the concrete, non-negotiable requirements to become one of these Florences of the 21st century?
Yeah, this is where the chapter shifts from the why to the what, from strategic theory to basically engineering specifications. It outlines 5 core requirements, 5 constitutional-level changes needed to fundamentally shift the geometry of the local economy and society.
These are the things that create that overwhelming success and resilience we talked about.
These are the load-bearing walls, yes. Okay, let's walk through them. Requirement 1 seems foundational. Adopt the Mind dashboard and, crucially, replace GDP as the primary measure of public success locally.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Step 1. Because if you don't change the dashboard, you're flying blind. Or worse, you're flying straight into a mountain while thinking you're climbing.
Because GDP.
GDP is obsessed only with size, volume of transactions, and it fundamentally counts destructive activity pollution, clear-cutting forests, building prisons as positive economic activity.
Right. It goes up even when things get worse.
Exactly. So if a city or a region continues to optimize its policies purely for GDP growth, it will inevitably optimize for extracting material capital faster than it regenerates, degrading network end capital by increasing inequality and stress, and probably stagnating real algorithmic capital by focusing on rent-seeking rather than innovation. It basically guarantees you accelerate towards collapse.
So the Mind Dashboard forces a focus on health.
On health and balance across all four critical capitals: material health, environment, infrastructure, intelligence flow, education, R&D, knowledge sharing, network cohesion, trust, social connection, safety, and diversity, resilience, options, cultural richness.
So for a nucleation site, success isn't about being the biggest.
Yeah.
It's about being the healthiest,
Yeah.
the most vital, the most resilient, the most regenerative, and just adopting mind, publicly committing to it, sends a huge signal to the world. It says, we're playing a different game here by different rules, rules optimized for long-term health and adaptability. That itself is incredibly attractive to the kind of talent and capital you want to attract.
Okay, but isn't that a massive political challenge? How does one city just decide to ignore GDP when national governments, central banks, global finance all run on GDP?
It is challenging, absolutely. But this is precisely why it has to happen at the nucleation site level first. It requires a bold, almost sovereign act by that community. The city doesn't necessarily stop reporting GDP figures required by the national government.
But internally, its own governance, its budget decisions, its regulatory priorities, its long-term planning, all of that gets strictly guided by the Mind metrics. If the Mind dashboard shows, say, network capital plummeting because of social isolation, the city's governance system must react and reallocate resources to fix that, regardless of what the local GDP numbers are doing. It's an internal declaration of independence from the old destructive logic.
Got it. An internal alignment to persistence. Requirement 2 is super specific, feels very last economy. Launch a dual currency system pilot using something like culture credits to fuel a vibrant local economy.
Yes, this directly tackles the metabolic rift we discussed earlier, but at the local level. The nucleation site must prove that technological abundance can be monetized constructively, not destructively.
How does the dual currency do that?
It operates two distinct monetary systems, two different economic physics side by side. First, you still have your normal national currency, maybe called foundation coins locally, to manage the scarce atomic economy, things like housing, energy, physical goods. This needs stability, it's subject to national monetary policy, etc.
Standard stuff.
Right. But second, you introduce a purely local, digitally native, abundant currency. The book calls them culture credits, designed specifically for the non-metabolic economy, the bit economy.
So for things like
Creative work, community building, care work, education, open source contributions, environmental regeneration efforts, all the valuable things that the old GDP system ignores or undervalues because they don't involve scarce physical resources in the same way.
and the key feature of these culture credits.
Demurrage. They have built-in negative interest. They slowly lose value over time if you just hoard them.
You have to spend them, circulate them.
Exactly. It fundamentally changes the psychology of the local economy. It actively incentivizes collaboration, sharing, fast transactions, gifting. It makes hoarding toxic and circulation virtuous. It directly builds network capital by making generosity and creativity the path of least resistance, the most rational economic choices within that system.
So the site is piloting a financial structure where abundance doesn't crash the system but actually fuels it.
Yes, proving that these two economic physics, scarcity-based and abundance-based, can coexist and synergize without the old scarce system automatically crushing the new abundant one.
That really is geometry engineering in action, designing the financial landscape itself.
Okay. Requirement 3 gets into the rules for businesses. Charter companies under new rules, implementing new local rules of benefit.
Right. This targets the engine of extraction in the old economy, the corporation itself. As we discussed, the standard corporate charter legally requires maximizing shareholder profit, often directly at the expense of the environment, social cohesion, or long-term well-being.
The externalities. The externalities, which are often the main product. So a symbiotic nucleation site has to use its local legal authority, maybe through special economic zone status or just innovative local chartering laws, to define a different kind of company, a company with a different geometry, a different legal purpose.
Like what, for example?
For instance, a local charter might legally require that, say, 50% of the total value generated by any company operating within the zone must demonstrably contribute positively to the local mine dashboard metrics, improving N capital or D capital or I capital, and only after meeting that requirement can profits be distributed as dividends to shareholders.
Wow. So instead of just asking companies to report on their negative impact,
You legally require them to optimize for positive impacts. It completely flips the incentive structure.
the path of least resistance for a company becomes being symbiotic.
Exactly. If building social trust or providing free access to educational resources, UAI elements, or contributing code to open source projects actually helps the company fulfill its primary legal mandate and makes it more profitable, then symbiotic behavior becomes the default rational strategy for businesses within that zone. Capital accumulation automatically serves the health and resilience of the site itself.
Okay, number 4 focuses on distribution, particularly of intelligence. Implement universal access to intelligence, UAI, guaranteeing every citizen access to foundational AI models and computation.
This is absolutely core to the new social contract outlined earlier in the book. It's the crucial step to democratize the benefits of the intelligence inversion.
Because if we don't,
If foundational AI models and the computing power needed to run them remain centralized and monopolized by a few giant corporations or states, then digital feudalism isn't just a risk, it's practically guaranteed.
so the nucleation side has to act like a mini-state in this regard.
It has to act as a sovereign entity, yes, to ensure that access to intelligence is treated like a fundamental public utility. Like clean water or electricity in the 20th century, it must be guaranteed to every citizen within the zone.
What does that mean practically?
Two key things, probably. First, the site itself needs to invest in, or heavily subsidize, access to foundational levels of computation, maybe through local cooperatively owned data centers or partnerships, making sure the basic resource isn't prohibitively expensive.
Okay.
Second, and maybe even more importantly, it must ensure every citizen is equipped with or has easy access to a highly competent, personalized AI agent, what the book calls a sovereign AI agent that is designed and legally bound to serve their interests, not the interests of some giant platform or the government.
Breaking the monopoly power of the big AI platforms.
Directly. It empowers the individual, it boosts local network capital because people have tools to coordinate and collaborate better, and it turns intelligence from a scarce, hoarded commodity into an abundant, democratized tool for flourishing.
Powerful. Okay, finally, requirement 5. This sounds like it ties everything together. Use geometry engineering for governance itself. Create a political model that reshapes the landscape so symbiotic choices are just the natural path.
Exactly. This is about the political operating system of the nucleation site. Because AI-driven systems, including the economy, will operate at incredibly high speeds, relying on slow, cumbersome, traditional legislative bodies just won't work. They can't keep up.
So the site needs new political protocols.
Protocols designed for both speed and wisdom. The book suggests possibilities like, for instance, establishing a guardian lattice, a set of automated governance systems, perhaps, that manage resources, enforce the new corporate charters, monitor the mine dashboard.
But monitored by whom? That sounds potentially dangerous.
Monitored and continuously guided by a human oracle council. And this council is key. It might be composed, perhaps, of randomly selected citizens serving limited terms, almost like a jury.
A citizen assembly, kind of?
Sort of, but potentially with a specific mandate. Their job isn't to debate every law, but to provide continuous value judgments and ethical guidance to the automated systems. Is this trend desirable? Are we prioritizing the right aspect of mind here? It's a way to keep the high-speed, automated systems constantly aligned with evolving human purpose and values, rather than letting them just optimize blindly for some narrow efficiency metric.
So the whole governance structure needs to be designed to be frictionless for good behavior.
Frictionless for symbiosis. It should make collaboration, trust-building, collective learning, and pro-social behavior easier and more rewarding than isolation, competition, and extraction. That's the essence of geometry engineering and governance.
Okay. That package of 5, the mine dashboard, dual currency, new company rules, UAI, and engineered governance, that's the blueprint.
That's the architectural specification. That's what transforms a place from just another city or network into a true nucleation site.
And the measure of success isn't growth in the old sense.
Not at all. Success isn't measured by size, by GDP, by population necessarily. It's measured by the health and vitality of its mine portfolio. Is it resilient? Is it innovative? Are people flourishing? Is it regenerating its resources?
And what does this successful site export?
Its primary export isn't physical goods or even digital services in the traditional sense. Its main export is proof. It exports a credible working model for a better future.
The ice crystal.
The perfect ice crystal. If just one or a few of these symbiotic zones can achieve a level of human flourishing, resilience, and genuine wealth creation that demonstrably vastly outstrips the decaying old economy around it, then imitation becomes rational. Imitation becomes inevitable, that success becomes the global engine of change. It compels the phase transition worldwide. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Okay, wow. So let's try and wrap our heads around this. What does this all mean? Chapter 19. It really is arguably the most hopeful, but also the most strategically concrete chapter we've covered from the book so far.
I think so. It provides a path.
Yeah. If I had to try and boil down the main argument of Chapter 19 into just one single powerful sentence, it would probably be something like this. The transition to a symbiotic civilization will not occur via global mandate or revolution, but through the strategic design and successful demonstration of localized, irresistibly superior prototypes.
That nails it.
Sure.
That captures the core physics of the transition strategy perfectly. It offers real leverage, by focusing our limited resources and energy where they can have the biggest systemic ripple effect, building that undeniable proof of concept.
Right.
So for you listening, maybe we can just list the key takeaways, the absolute essentials you need to carry forward from this deep dive into the strategy of hope.
Okay, let's bullet point them.
1, that old dream of a top-down global conversion, it's structurally impossible. Our existing institutions, the slow engine, are just too entrenched, too resistant, and operate on a completely different timescale than exponential AI development.
Okay, impossible dream check.
2, real civilizational change needs nucleation. It requires the conscious, deliberate creation of a small, successful prototype of the new system, that first perfect ice crystal in the supercooled water whose undeniable success compels global imitation, rather than trying to force compliance from the top down.
Build the seed. Got it.
3, history backs this up. Precedents like the Renaissance nucleating in Florence or the scientific revolution starting in protected zones like the Royal Society show that transformative new protocols almost always emerge outside the established institutional power structures.
Learn from history. Check.
4, pursuing this symbiotic model isn't just a nice idea, it's a strategic imperative in the AGI race. Only open, high-trust systems rich in network N and diversity D capital can actually cultivate the resilient, creative, aligned, and truly wise intelligence needed to win that race safely and beneficially.
It's the smart move, not just the good move.
Okay. And finally, 5, there's a concrete architectural blueprint for building a nucleation site. It involves 5 non-negotiable elements: switching to the mine dashboard, piloting a demerged dual currency system, chartering companies under new rules of benefit, guaranteeing universal access to intelligence, UAI, locally, and using geometry engineering for faster, wiser governance.
The 5 requirements. Okay, that's a really powerful and, importantly, actionable framework.
It gives us something to build.
It does. So we've established a strategy, build a new world, starting with these small, perfect seeds, these nucleation sites, these modern Florences. But okay, what happens next? As these symbiotic seed sites start to grow, hopefully, and connect with each other, maybe forming global networks, how do we even track that? How do we manage this emerging, maybe hyper-intelligent planetary system? The old dashboard GDP is dead. Useless for this.
Right, we need new tools for a new reality.
Exactly. So next time, we're going to dive in to the new science required to actually measure, understand, and maybe even guide this incredibly complex global ecosystem that could emerge. That's Chapter 20, Intelligent Macroeconomics.
Moving beyond GDP entirely.
Yes. We'll explore how the mind framework isn't just a static dashboard, but how it actually allows us to start solving complex macroeconomic puzzles, things like boom and bust cycles, technological unemployment, sustainable growth problems that have frankly baffled conventional economists for decades.
It's moving from the architecture of a single seed
To the physics of an entire new world, an intelligent planetary economy. Sounds ambitious, but that's where the book takes us. So definitely join us for that next deep dive. Thank you for joining us for this one.